case, and it provides more than you could ever know for these kids, even if they're not, showing appreciation for your services. It provides a consistency that just cannot be topped, because kids move from foster home to foster home, they move from caseworker to caseworker, and at least they have the consistency of a CASA. So thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and go through the slideshow. Adoptions is a pretty complex area. That's why we have a special section and special people to do it, because the paperwork is a little bit more complex, and adoption issues are a little bit different than child protection issues. Their child protection issues are still there, but we also have added issues of adoption. And let me see if I can move this to the next slide. So this is an adoptive family. I got their permission to use their picture. So they came up with a little plaque after 965 days in foster care. Carrie and Julian, forever underwise. So that was March 6, 2019. And as we'll learn as we go through this presentation, oftentimes there's barriers to get to adoption, and we'll learn a little bit about those as we go. So you may have heard there's a life of a case in Adams County. It starts off with the screening. So they take the calls and decide if, they take the calls and then we go to teams and we decide if it's going to be assigned for investigation. And that's the intake department. If there's enough concerns, we have an intake worker go out and do an assessment and see if the safety concerns are great enough to assign an ongoing caseworker and possibly open up a court case. So the parents work their treatment plan at that time, and if they are not successful with their treatment plan, termination of parental rights will occur, and the case will be transferred to permanency. So permanency, so there's adoption and permanency. There's also youth in transition, and that's a smaller program. There's some youth that are way older and they are not wanting to be adopted and want to transition to adulthood through that program. It's a smaller program. Anytime a child wants to be adopted, that is where we go. And there is no such thing as a child that's not adoptable. It's just finding the right family for them. And the entire adoption process takes anywhere from 5 months to, can be up to a couple of years, to be honest, just depending on the issues and if there's an appeal. So let me move this over a little bit. So sometimes termination means that contact with the biological parents is discontinued. Usually when children are placed with non-relatives, this almost always happens, that there's no ongoing contact with the parents. Sometimes when children are placed with kin or family, some type of family or contact may continue. And it's really important at that time that the relatives have good boundaries to keep kids safe, and also for the emotional well-being of the children. So sometimes after we're not involved anymore, usually, maybe a holiday comes along and they don't have, the relatives might attend a gathering with the parents. Sometimes the parents stay involved just a little bit. It just depends on the issues. Sometimes the judge orders a no contact order, so until the adoption occurs, there would not be able to be any contact. And often for transition sakes, oftentimes it's in the best interest of the children, because they have to get used to not having their parents in their life, and it kind of sends mixed messages to them if they're still seeing their family. So at termination, sometimes the judge will order or approve a goodbye visit, and that's a final visit with the parents. It's recorded, the parents get a copy and the foster or kinship family gets a copy, so the children can have it at a later date. Like I said, there are a lot of children don't have any contact with their parents after termination. And then there's also the issue about telling the child about termination, and that should be done as a team whenever possible. And it's really hard for older children to accept this concept. So it's really important that we all work together on how to tell them about termination of parental rights. It oftentimes occurs in a therapy session if the child has a therapist. If not, sometimes the caseworker, CASA, and GAL will go out and talk with the child about the termination of parental rights. And I'm assuming you probably know guardian ad litem is GAL, and that's the child's attorney. I just kind of assumed that you guys had that knowledge, but I should probably be sure, because sometimes we have all these acronyms and we don't always know what they mean. There's a lot of issues that go with it being adopted, and these are different things, and that you could go in depth about each of these separate training for hours. But of course there's loss. They have a loss of their biological parents. Sometimes they move from foster home to foster home, so they have loss of foster parents. Sometimes they move from kinship home to foster home, so there's that loss too. There's just a ton of loss that these children go to. Rejection, why didn't my parents love me enough to do what they needed to do? Or sometimes it's moving from foster home to foster home. You know, why didn't they like me enough to keep me? You know, and it's not all children that go through this, so don't assume, you know, if a child says it, then it's there. You know, guilt and shame. Sometimes they feel guilty. They know that a caseworker went out and interviewed them at school, and they gave information about their parents that might have got them in trouble. Grief, and that's an obvious one. Identity. You know, we are our history, and when we lose that history, when we move from biological parents' home or foster home to foster home, it gets mixed up in these kids' heads, and they don't have anybody there to help straighten it out. So, and that's one thing I did not bring up, and I was going to add it to a slideshow, is there's something called a life book, where a therapist or a caseworker or a CASA sit down with the child and just help them organize their life. So I was born in, you know, Michigan on this date, and then I moved to Colorado. If you know, you do as much as you know. And I lived with my parents until this year, and then I lived with this foster family. And I always like to try to get information from foster families, just anything that the child did that was maybe goofy or silly or fun that they really enjoyed about having the child in their home, and include that. It just gives them a sense of self, you know. Oh yeah, I was told that when I was 3 years old, I sang this song like this, and everybody laughed, or whatever it is. It just gives us a sense of who we are. Intimacy and master and control. And these kids don't feel like they have much control at all. So as much as we can do as adults to give them some control, give them some choices, we try to do that. You know, encourage the foster parents to do it, because really their life has been out of control ever since, or probably since before Child Protection Services got involved. So overview of the adoption process. We got a lot of paperwork in adoptions. So when we have a child in a home that wants to adopt, and have been approved to adopt, one thing, the family that wants to adopt, whether it's kinship or a certified foster home, has to have a home study done. They have to fill out the application. So once that's all been done, and they want to adopt, the child's in their home, we do a disclosure meeting to them. So we talk about the case history. We talk about history in the child's family, the history of a child, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. I'm going way too far into this. This is just an overview. Child becomes legally freed for adoption. So if termination is not appealed, or the appeal's resolved. So those two things can happen right up front if we're ready, if it's ready. After the child's legally freed, and that's a legal process, we don't have any control over it, the following can occur. We do an adoption assistance meeting. We request the county administrative consent for adoption. We do the adoption petition and have the family sign it, and then we have the finalization hearing. And I'll go into a little bit more detail. First of all, this is a huge thing in adoptions, is the parents have the right to appeal the termination of parental rights. And it's been happening in probably about 98% of the cases that go to termination now. And it delays permanency for kids quite a bit. But so within 21 days, the parents tell their attorney that they would like to appeal. There doesn't have to be any good reason, just to be honest. And they file that with the court. If they do it within 21 days of the judge signing the termination order, then this will go to the Court of Appeals. So the Court of Appeals, they're always backed up. They've got a ton of appeals to review. So this process takes a while. It's all done by paperwork. So they write up, oh gosh, I forgot what they call it, arguments, and they send it back and forth to the Court of Appeals. So the county attorney does that. I think the JAL does that. And so does the respondent, the parent's attorney. So that all happens, but it usually takes at least 6 to, I think it's up to 12 to 16 months for appeals to be resolved. So it really delays permanency quite a bit. And then after that is done, after that's resolved, then the parents do have the right to take it to the federal level. And that is heard really quickly. Usually they don't hear it at all. They look at the Court of Appeals and they're like, no, this is not worthy of looking at it. And they turn the request down. So that delays permanency quite a bit. If we don't have an appeal to the termination of parental rights, we can get an adoption done 5-6 months after termination of parental rights if the child's in a adoptive home that's stable, of course. So the first thing we do when a child is in that adoptive home that's stable and the family wants to adopt and there's no big concerns, we go ahead, we do a disclosure meeting. So we tell the family all about the child's history, the family history, and then at the time of termination, the ongoing caseworker is supposed to ask the biological parents to fill out a form called the Biological Parent Social and Medical History. A lot of times it's hard to get that form filled out by the parents. If they're getting close to termination of parental rights, they're not always as cooperative. We try to let them know that this is for the child to have so they know more about their history, but sometimes they're pretty upset and it's hard to get this form. So in this disclosure meeting, we want to have the caseworker, usually the adoption caseworker. We're pretty new to the case, so we invite the ongoing caseworker. We want the CASA and the GAL to be present along with the foster to adopt or kin family. So, and we give the information, we record it so the family can have a copy of it to listen to later and just to show that we've given this information. It is required by law that we do a disclosure meeting. Another part of the adoption process is adoption subsidy assistance. We used to just call it subsidy, but we call it adoption assistance. I put subsidy in there just for people that know the word that we used to use. So each county has their own policy regarding adoption assistance. The county, along with the adopting parents, will meet to discuss the needs of the child and the circumstances of the family and negotiate an agreement that meet those needs. This can be Medicaid only or a monthly financial amount along with Medicaid. And the person that does these meetings needs about 2 months to do it, just in case there's any snags. Sometimes they don't come to an agreement and they go back and forth a little bit. Other times foster or kinship families hire their own attorney and it's hard to get them coordinated in that meeting. We can't schedule this adoption assistance hearing until the child's legally freed, and we can't schedule the adoption hearing until this meeting occurs. It's a very important meeting because this determines what the child will get after adoption and what supports they will get from the county.
Sydney, we had a quick question.
What's that?
How long does the adoption assistance last?
It has been up to 18. I think it's switched to 21 now, just because of different laws. At least the Medicaid part of it. I think adoption assistance, if there's a financial amount, I think it stops at 18. And I think Medicaid and some other stuff go to 21. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to check on that. I know at least 18. It can go longer. If a child's in school, it will continue until the child is out of school, if there's like delays for the child. And, but that's negotiated upon too. But I think there are laws around that, and I'm not exactly sure what they are. It's at least 18, but I think it's gone to an older age now, just over the last couple of years because of all the changes in legislature. So I can check into that, and if you want, I could get back to you, Becca, and you could send out an email to answer that question.
Thank you.
That's a good question. So other things we have to do as caseworkers, we have to do a consent memo, adoption petition filing, and adoption finalization. So before the adoption finalization occur, we have to get the administrative consent for the adoption, and our management signs a form, a legal form, saying that they agree with this adoption. So also we have to type up a adoption petition. Usually the caseworker does that unless the family has an attorney and they want them to do it. We do it free of charge, of course, and then we have the family review it and make any corrections. At this time, if the family wants to change the child's name, that is a possibility. So they let us know, and then we'll do the name change in the adoption petition. You know, and that's something that's really important to consider too, because when it comes to identity, children often think of their first name, especially, as part of their identity. So if you ever hear that a family wants to change a child's first name, you know, have them do some research on the internet on doing that. It needs to be a very thoughtful decision and not just, you know, randomly done because they like the name, another name better, you know, because that child often, you know, if a child's adopted at the age of 12, I mean, they've had that name for 12 years. That's who they are. So just, it is possible that they can change the first name, but it needs to be a careful consideration before doing so. So after the family reviews the adoption petition and makes corrections, they sign, notarize it, and return it to the caseworker with a check. It's a filing fee check for $167. So Adams County Court, in order to file the adoption petition, they have a filing fee of $167. It costs nothing, of course, to adopt a child, but that's the court's fee to file the petition. If it's a sibling group, let's say 3 kiddos, it's $167 for the first child and $3 extra to file the additional 2. So it'd be $173 for 3 kids.
Sydney, we had another question from Zoe.
Okay.
Can the adoption assistance be changed after adoption if testing shows changes in diagnosis?
Yes, the adoption assistant, and that's negotiated during the meeting. So so the adoption assistance worker will let the family know that, but basically at any time they can come back to us if the needs of the child's change. But they'll talk more about that, and that'll be part of the agreement. They didn't used to always do that, but they do now. They you know, if the needs change, we want to support these families. It's really important to give them the support they need. And sometimes things go horribly awry and the child's needs become super high, and we're there to support them. And we also have a post-adoptions worker that can consult with families who have adopted and help them get the resources they need. It is a grant position, it's part-time, but if needed, we have a person to support families after adoption a little bit. She doesn't do the counseling, but she does the referrals and helps family get the support they need. So right now we're doing for the adoption day, everything's being done through video. The child and the family need to be present for the adoption finalization hearing. And I forgot to put this on there, but at the hearing, if it's in person, we give them what we call final decrees of adoption. So they'll get 2 final decrees of adoption signed by the judge and notarized by the court. And that's what shows that the family has adopted, and it serves like a birth certificate until the family is able to go and apply for a birth certificate. So usually about 60 days after adoption, Vital Statistics will contact the family and say, okay, we got something from the court saying the adoption occurred. Go ahead and order your new birth certificate. So the new birth certificate will have the adoptive parents' names on it, along with the child's new name. And another special thing that it's National Adoption Month, November is, and we do have National Adoption Day coming up this Friday. It's a super special event if you ever get invited to it. I don't know if it's going to be quite as special this year because we're doing it all by video conference. But it's so much fun. We any children that are close to adoption around this day, we try to finalize their adoption on this day, and we have a party, and the county commissioners speak before the adoptions occur, and it's a really, really fun event. We can't save up adoptions for National Adoption Days, but if we're close to ready, maybe in October, we can push it out a little bit just to try to get that special day for the family, because it's a huge party, and it's kind of neat because they get to see other kids being adopted, and it just makes them feel like this is not so unusual, and they don't sit in each other's hearings, but they, for the party and stuff, everybody's there celebrating. So this is a video adoption that I had just last month, and so this is how it's looking now. As you can see, you know, everybody's at home, and the big family, that's the one little girl getting adopted there. So it's looking a little bit different than usual, you know, but still a very special day. So sometimes when kids are transferred to adoptions, they're not in an adoptive home, and this is a, you know, this is a time that we have to do recruitment. We have to find an adoptive home that meets the needs of the child. And we have recruitment tools, as you can see: Adopt US Kids, Raise the Future, Heart Gallery. We have small matching events, Wednesday's Child, and we like to we respond to all required inquiries on Adopt US Kids. So anybody from the United States can go on there. They could, you know, inquire about a child, you know, until a family's home studied. We have to limit the amount of information we can get them. Once we have a home study for the family, because it helps us realize we have to protect confidentiality. We don't want to be disclosing a whole lot of information on every child. It's very private information what these children have been through. And I'm going to try to click on some of these things. So we have Wednesday's Child, and I have one ready, but I'm going to wait until I get done with the slideshow in case it doesn't work. And then we have Heart Gallery. I have one of those. There's also a choice mentoring program for older youth. I think it's age 12 and above. So families that are, they get background checks and go through training, and it's through Raise the Future. And what they do is they have events. Right now it's a lot of video stuff, but they get to know these kiddos and mentor them for a long period of time. We have had at least one child adopted through that. It's not necessarily set up for that, it's more mentoring, but they get to know these kids so well. You know, they're taking them out to eat, they're going to the park with them. You know, I know things are limited right now, but they really get to know these children, and it's a great situation for mentoring. But also some of them decide they want to be adoptive parents for these kids. So we have our recruiters. Rochelle is from Adams County, and she does our recruitment, and she also does post-adoptive services. There's also Wendy's Wonderful Kids, and you might have heard of them. They help us, they get to know the child, and they help us look for adoptive families. They do file mining. They go through and see if there's any relatives that we have not found, and help us look for any possibilities for kids that don't already have an adoptive home. And then once we have a few home studies that seem appropriate, we will go ahead and have what we call a matching staffing. So we get home studies. Home studies it's a report on the family that's interested in the child. It's a pretty lengthy, sometimes 15 to 20 pages history on the family and the challenges they have and their financial information and their everything, just everything you could think of about them. And then we will have what we call a matching staffing. And in the staffing would be the caseworker, probably the ongoing worker, maybe supervisor, the guardian ad litem, the CASA, and anybody else who might be skilled at giving feedback. So in that meeting, we talk about the child and the child's needs. And we pick a family based on the child's needs. We're not looking, for a child to fit a family. We want a family to be able to meet the child's needs. And so then we talk about the home studies and which family might be best to meet the child's needs. At that time, we often go out in person if we find a family that might be a good match and meet them in person. So we might choose the top 2 out of 3 to 5 families that we think are the strongest, and we might go out and meet both families, and then we might decide which one has the strongest ability to meet the child's needs. So after we have selected a family, there's another adoptive family. This is in person, yay. So we have to prepare a child for placement and tell everybody, even if the family, we've all chosen a family, we need to be on board about who's going to talk to the child. And we shouldn't talk to them beforehand because we want this to be done very carefully, maybe with the therapist input, maybe, who knows, wants to be there, the caseworker would want to be there, maybe the CASA and the GL would want to be there too, but we go out and talk to them about the family. And at that time that we talk to them, I usually like to have a book from the family, like a photo book, so they can, because there's a lot of anxiety. This child's been in this foster home maybe a year, maybe longer. And then we find a family and they hear they're going to move. If we can give them something visual to help and answer as many questions as we can, it helps the child a lot. So we'll have a photo book, and sometimes it'll be the family, the house, maybe the school that the child will be going to, maybe the family pet, just things that kids would be interested in. Maybe their room, just whatever the foster to adopt family wants to put in that book. And then we talk to the child and see what questions the child has. And I usually have them meet this family within a couple of days of telling them, because if you wait too long, it just seems to build a lot of anxiety, just wondering more and more about this. And that's just a meet. Whenever we can, we don't want to move children quickly. And I know in the beginning of the case, we often move children quickly. But if we have the time to do it thoughtfully, if the child's in a safe home and we can do a thoughtful transition and let them get to know the family, it always works out better for the kids. So after meeting that family, we set up some visits. So maybe, the next visit will be going out with the family for a few hours, and maybe doing that a couple of times, and then maybe an overnight and maybe a weekend. It depends on the child how long the transition will occur. So we'd like to move at their pace, even though we try to set a little schedule where they'd be meeting the child and spending time with them. If the child is not ready, we'll slow it down. If they're like, you know what, I want to move, I don't want to do this anymore, we can speed it up a little bit. We don't want to just do it, after a second visit or anything, but we can speed it up. But it's a team decision. So that's one thing to remember is when I'm talking about the child has a team. There's the caseworker, there's the CASA, there's the GAL, there's the foster parent. We all kind of work together to decide what's best for the kiddo. And if the child has questions for the family, that's one thing. What questions do you have that I'll bring back to the family and then get back to the child and answer them? And then checking in with them, that's really important during a transition to how's it going? You know, is there anything you don't like? So, and that's one thing I've really, like I just transitioned the kiddo, and the CASA on the case has been great with that, because I don't have as much, I don't have the time to get out there 3 times a week and visit with the child. How's it going? So that is the one great way that a CASA can help, is just checking in with the child, you know, like you guys do anyways, and answer, you know, and getting back to the team, maybe send out an email. I saw, you know, little Susie today, and she reports that she's, you know, really excited and happy, or she has worries that the dog's too big, or whatever it is. So so yeah, so the transition should be child driven, and we should check in with them. And this is from National Adoption Day. Was it last year? So one of our employees has a puppet, and they do, sometimes they'll do face painting and balloon blowing up, what are your twisty balloons for the kids. So it's a huge celebration. So, and at the adoption hearing, some families have ceremonies, as you saw in that first picture. They did a little plaque. A lot of families do little plaques or something special. If they're with a religious or Christian organization, sometimes they have their pastor or whoever come to the adoption hearing and sign a form from them, that just stating that they're going to take good care of the kiddo as a Christian parent. But every ceremony is different. I had a teenager where they gave the teenager a pinky ring, just to show commitment to her. This family, if I can get this going, this family did a little dance to celebrate their adoption. I'm going to try to get this up, and they gave me permission to show this. So is it sharing?
It's not sharing.
It's not sharing.
So,
Doggone
no, it's okay. So if you
it.
unshare and then reshare, that might work.
All right, let's try it.
Okay.
I don't know how to stop it. Yeah, that's what happened last time. Hopefully, at least I can get the heart gallery working. Let's try it one more time. Share screen. There it is. No, it won't let me do it. I don't know why. It just says now it's saying an error occurred. Let me go ahead and bring up a child from Wednesday's Child. So Wednesday's Child is Channel 4 News. Helps with recruitment for kids that are waiting, that have been waiting a long time for adoptive homes. And this is one of my coworkers. Let me get back here. One of my coworkers, it's on her caseload. All right, let me try to share again. Hopefully this one will work. I'm not seeing it on there. I had it up. I know I have it up. Oh, I think I know what happened. Sorry, I'm not real Zoom educated. I'm learning here.
And Sydney, we did have a question, but just we can circle back to it.
All right. Is that sharing?
Yep.
I don't know if the audio is there.
There's no audio. If you go back into your share screen, there's a button at the bottom left-hand corner. It says share computer audio.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So where is that at?
So when you go into share screen, you're going to see share computer sound on the bottom left-hand corner.
All right. Thank you. All right, this should work.
always thinks of others before herself. She loves crafting, so I thought it'd be fun to create a floral arrangement with her. Take a look. You want this all gone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hazel delicately places the flower into her creation. How'd you do that so effortlessly?
Maybe let's just say I was born to be a florist.
Here at the Twisted Tulip in Cherry Creek North, Hazel continues to add a plethora of flowers to her vase, her personality seemingly coming out with all the colors. Hazel is spunky and funny.
It's kind of making a face, I think.
Yes, she has a green thumb, but she also is a talented crafter. But more than anything, Hazel often gives to others. She is most passionate about helping people.
I kind of want to help homeless children.
You want to help homeless children?
Yeah,
And why do you feel a connection to them?
because half of the stuff I've been through, what they've been through, and it's not easy looking around for scraps of food.
You've always had that in you, though. Ever since I've met you, you've always said, I want to help people, and in particular, you want to help kids. A family would help this child bloom. What do you think of my creation? Do you like it okay?
It looks beautiful.
She is sweet and deserves a chance to grow and flourish. Hazel's such a trooper. She came out to this
Hold on, let me stop the audio. So that was a Wednesday's child. So if you have a child that's waiting and your caseworker has been recruiting for a little while, you know, that's something that you can recommend too. We also have, let me see if I can get the Heart Gallery photo. I think I might have clicked out of it by accident. But the Heart Gallery, you might have heard of them. They do photos of children that are waiting and waiting for adoptive homes. We say waiting. And they'll do photos, and they post it on the, it was previously known as Adoption Exchange. Just so you know, if you've heard the word Adoption Exchange, it's now Raise the Future. So the Heart Gallery has a space on the Raise the Future website, and they have photos of kids that are waiting. There's also a little video clip, and I think I accidentally minimized that, unless that's it. No, that's not it. So also one other thing that I do have, if I did not minimize it, like I did half the stuff here. But I have a letter that I send out to adoptive families, and let me see here. And I can bring that up. It just explains the adoption process, because there's so many things that we do in adoptions, and a lot of it's the same things that we were doing, like going out to the home once a month, doing foster care reviews is one thing. You might have heard of those, and that's for certified foster homes only. It's not for kinship families. I'll share that screen, and then if you guys want to look at that, I don't know if we have time to read it all, but it's really comprehensive, and because there's a lot going on in adoptions. Where did it go? For some reason, everything doesn't show up on there. My apologies. I need to do more trainings, I think, don't I? And I don't know why. It's just a Word document, and I'm not sure why it's not showing up on my show all windows, maybe. No? There it is. So this is a letter that I give to families, and it's basically explains kind of things that I've already said. When parental rights have been terminated and you have a child placed in your home, there are several things that need to occur before the adoption can be finalized. The child needs to be placed in your home at least 6 months before the adoption finalization can occur. And below is a list of things that occur. So we have monthly home visits. The caseworker should always talk to the child outside of the presence of the provider. So they should see the child maybe alone in their bedroom or alone outside. Just talk to them alone, just to be sure that they are comfortable. If there's anything they needed to say about the provider, they could do that. So there's family team meetings that occur every 6 months, sometimes more frequently. If the child is not in an adoptive home, we try to do them every 3 months just to come up with ideas on how to move that along. We need documents from the foster or kinship families, so medical documentation. Kids need to be seen by a doctor a minimum of annually, and by a dentist at least every 6 months. Foster care reviews, and that's for certified foster homes or certified kinship homes. So the state reviews our files and they make sure that we're moving a case along towards permanency and that the child's needs are being met. We have review hearings for court every 1 to 4 months until the adoption is finalized. So the adoptive family needs to fill out paperwork for their adoption assistance file. So they need to file an application, and the home study needs to occur if it hasn't already. Other things that need to occur, and that's kind of what we went over right here. The caseworker will receive legal freed paperwork once the child is legally freed for adoption. If there's an appeal, it takes a long time. It takes 6 months to a year and a half for this process. If there's no appeal, we can usually finalize an adoption about 5 or 6 months after the termination of parental rights, and the child's in an adoptive home and the home study's done. Home studies take a while to do, so if that hasn't been done, it's going to be another 2 to 3 months added on to that. So the disclosure meeting, that's the meeting where we talk about the history of the child and the case and any, hereditary factors that the child might have. If a parent's bipolar, we bring that up in that meeting if we know it. We talk a little bit about the criminal history, the adoption petition, the caseworker types up and the family reviews and signs and notarizes and returns it to the caseworker so it can be filed with Adams County Court. And the adoption finalization hearing. Once we're in person again, families can invite whoever they want to the adoption hearing. Sometimes it's a huge celebration where we have 50 people in the courtroom, and sometimes it's just, mom, dad, and child are not adoptive mom, adoptive dad, and the child. So it can be as big or as small as they wanted. If families are traveling out of state, we need to know if the kinship has custody. They just need to let us know. But if Adams County has custody, we need to give written permission for medical care while they're traveling out of state. If they're going out of the country, we need a long time to get that approval. And also they'll need to get a passport for the child. We need to be kept up to date, of any changes in the home, anybody moved in, any crises, any police calls, any illnesses. And we can't schedule the adoption hearing until the adoption subsidy assistance meeting has occurred. And then I just talked a little bit about name changes in adoption. Just be careful if you're changing a first name of a child. And then I put the hotline down at the bottom, emergency after hours. And right now, because of COVID-19, we are required to go to the home and see families. I try to meet outside with the family whenever possible. We do have to see their bedroom each time, so I'll go in, put my mask on. Anybody in the house, I ask that they have a mask on. And I do a quick walk to the child's room, back outside, and then we have a meeting out there whenever possible. Sometimes it's not, given the weather, and then I ask the family to put a mask on and distance, and we can talk inside. The only thing is sometimes with really little children, they don't wear masks, and your risk goes up a little bit because of that. So what kind of questions does everybody have? That was a quick overview. And
Yeah, that was impressive. We do have, I'm going to just read from the chat here. So we had a few questions come in. This is from Judy. I don't recall a disclosure meeting during a kinship adoption. Is the process different?
Nope, disclosure meetings must happen with kinship family too. I wonder if maybe the caseworker forgot to invite you. I just wonder how it had to, with Adams County, we make sure it occurs, and right now we're audited to it. So we have to be sure it occurs. I don't know how long ago the adoption was. I don't know if there was different rules back then, but nope, it should have occurred.
Okay. And then John asked, how often do foster parents become adoptive parents?
Luckily, it happens quite often. And that's one thing with Adams County and most of the other counties. We ask when foster parents come to us and they say, oh, I want to be an adoptive parent. It's like, well, you have to foster first. Our goal is to get this child home, but if the child doesn't go home and if, you know, there's no kinship available, that you'd be looked at first for this child. Most often that's, unless the child's new to their home and they've only been there a month or something, sometimes we'll look at all families, you know, but if the child's been in the home for a while and the family's been doing a great job at caring for the kid and the child's adjusted, we usually like to use that foster home as the foster to adopt placement for the child.
And Faye asked, are there cases when children refuse to be adopted? And she's thinking specifically of older children.
Yes, yes, there are. If there's a child that's 17 and a half and come into adoptions, they're like, no, I don't want to be adopted. Oftentimes we will have them go to our youth in transition program. They're just really specialized to help transition that child to the community. Sometimes I've got a child on my caseload now. We do have a CASA on that case. I don't know if she's here, but she's 16 years old and she has gone back and forth, you know, one home visit. Yeah, I want to be adopted by this family. She's been there for over a year. And the next home visit, no, I don't want to be adopted. And the next home visit, oh yeah, I want to be adopted. Next home visit. So we have something through Adams County called ambivalence counseling, where we have people in our internal treatment team that can go out and talk to the child, just a couple of sessions, then help them make that decision. Because there's so many issues, especially with the older kids. Sometimes they still have some contact with their family and those loyalty issues come up and they are like feeling just torn apart because they really have fallen in love with their adoptive family, but they still love their mom, and mom says, you know, don't let them adopt you. You know, they can get ripped apart at that age. And that's one really good point that I just thought of is if you think that these older children aren't going to have contact with your family, you're wrong. I mean, social media has gotten everybody is connected some way, shape, or form. So it's really important to talk with foster families about that and how they're going to deal with that and what their expectations are around it. If they know the family's name and have been on their, you know, Facebook account forever, that's going to happen.
This is from Linda. One of the challenges she faced when she adopted her daughter was being a single mom. Has this perception or process changed? Are single parents encouraged or sought out?
We seek out everyone. We need foster families. It doesn't matter what your marital status, race, religion, anything. You know, we want adopted families. And you know, to be honest, I've been in matching staffings before, and we'll have a single parent. And sometimes we're looking for that because sometimes, like, maybe there's so much trauma around a male figure or vice versa, a female figure, that, you know, this child might do really good with just a single parent, you know. So we welcome everybody and no. I think the most important, being like a single parent, is to have a support system. That's one thing that we'd want to know is, okay, what happens when Johnny's been acting out and you're ready to pull your hair out? Who are you going to call to help you out for a bit? And if you have a two-parent family, it's like, well, they say they can just, you know, we'll tag team. He can take the kid to the store while I go sit in the bathtub for 2 hours. But when you're single, that can be a barrier. So it's important that you have a support system that you can, you know, identify that can help you when you need it, because everybody gets frustrated in parenting. And who can you send little Johnny, you know, to have an overnight with when you just got to get away?
Yeah, And then my question too, would it be possible, Sydney, for you to send me a copy of that document that you just went through, that Word doc? I
Yeah,
think that would be really handy to have, especially for SPCs and CASAs who are looking at explaining the adoption process.
and just so you know, procedures and policies and everything is changing. It changes every month through the county. So don't be surprised if you have that document for 6 months and you're like, well, you know, it says this need to be done in this time frame, and it's everything's changed, and now we need to do this. You know, that's one thing you can count on with Child Protective Services. It's going to change, and it's not always going to be a quick process. The procedure, the whole case, you know, yeah.
And then the question was, how many kiddos in Adams County are adopted each year?
Let's see. I think it's close to 200. What are we up to now? I just filled out the form for National Adoption Day. We don't have quite as many this year, but we're anywhere from 120 to 200 adoptions a year, sometimes more, you know, that we are, and we keep hoping that it'll be less. I mean, you know, we just hope the county keeps putting services for birth families up front to try to get them where they can parent again. So we keep hoping that that's going to slow things down, but it hasn't, you know, it just hasn't. And every year I hear, you know, we're going to have less adoptions, we've got more services up front, and it just, unfortunately, it just doesn't happen.
And then maybe Bob can clarify. I'm going to see if I can get this right. What about kids that are from undocumented families? Is the process different? Is that what you're asking, Bob? Or do they even qualify to be adopted? Maybe?
You know what? I am not sure about that. We have to be able to do a home study. A home study has to be done. And in order to do a home study, we have to be able to do a background. That's right, I have had undocumented families adopt, yes. I don't remember what the procedure was. It's been a couple of years, but we have done adoptions. I think they have to be in the United States legally though. So I'm not sure how it works. If you need to know more about that, I can find out more. I've done it before. I don't remember the circumstances around it, if they were here in the United States legally or not. So I'm not sure if I can answer this question.
Can I interrupt for a second and ask if we have all of these kids that are undocumented in the United States that they can't find their parents? I know that's not specific to Adams County, but what do you think is going to happen with those kids?
I have a child that's not documented right now. They might have dual citizenship, so we're trying to figure that out. So there is a way that the court works through that, and I forgot the legal terminology that they do. It's, you know, we don't have a whole lot of kids that are not documented, thank goodness, because you're right. I mean, I could see in some of the southern states, they probably deal with this a lot more than we would. I know, what is it called? I know that they were gonna put my child that I have that's not documented in a special status, and I forgot what it's called, through the court. And they'd have to, it's a long process. So I think they said that this process that it goes through takes about 6 years. So some of them would even age out, you know. Yeah, and we do have, yeah, it's really complicated. I don't think I can quite answer this. I know it can happen, but the procedure is beyond my scope of comprehension because I haven't done it.
So I think, Barbara, she answered the second half of your question, but the first half of Barbara's question is, how about ICWA cases?
ICWA cases, so we have to, for those of you who don't know what ICWA is, Indian Child Welfare Act. So when we get involved with a family, we need to determine if they are involved with a tribe. If they are involved with the tribe, we notify the tribe. If they have some heritage but don't know if the tribe would intervene, we send notice to the tribe. A lot of the tribes, even if the family is registered, they hand the case back to our court. There have been times I've only had like one case since I've been in adoptions that, you know, was truly ICWA. And they participated in hearings, and then they gave jurisdiction back to our court because they were too busy. They couldn't deal with it. So the tribe has the right to use their courts and take jurisdiction of not only the court, but even the child. I've heard they can take jurisdiction and place the child back in their if it's a reservation, they might place them there, or they might help look for families. The case that I had, the tribe wasn't really helpful, you know, unfortunately, because I kept them involved even though they gave jurisdiction back to our court. And then I notified them that we had an adoptive family, and then on the day of the adoption, they answered the phone and they said, no, we're not approving this adoption, but they had already given jurisdiction back to our court, so it didn't matter. So it can be challenging. I've never had a case that the tribe took over the court case or the child. So I don't know if that answers your question. ICWA, and that's what appeals, a lot of appeals come back because of that. So the Court of Appeals looks at it. We didn't resolve ICWA in a successful manner, so they send it back to our court for ICWA to be resolved. And then we send notices out, and then a lot of times the tribes won't take the case and don't see any enrollment with the child or the family, and then we say, well, it's not an ICWA case.
Well, we're right at 1 o'clock. For the training, I thank you all for logging on. Do we have time for maybe 1 or 2 last questions?
I'm open.
Okay.
I don't know if I can answer them. Pretty complex questions. It's a complex system though, so.
So at this point, I'm going to stop recording. And if I understand